My name is Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. On this episode of the podcast, are we in a new era for myopia management? Is myopia a cash cow? Does the modern optometrist need to specialize just to survive? And could major companies be doing more for the myopia industry as a whole? All of this and more is coming up with my special guest, Dr. Cary Herzberg. He's been doing myopia management for 40 plus years. He's my dad. I grew up in his practice. It's how I got my start in myopia. But more importantly, he and I together have seen so many incredible changes happen over the last 20 years. But I got to be honest with you, a lot of things have stayed painfully stagnant, and we discuss what needs to change in order to usher in this new future, this new era of myopia management. All of that is going to be in this regular episode. But if you're a supporter of the Myopia Mindset by going to myopiamindset.com and clicking on the subscription button, you'll be getting an extended version of this episode, an additional 30 to 40 minutes. And if you love nerding out on myopia and myopia industry and all of the great stuff that Cary and I talk about all of the time, then I highly recommend you become a supporter of the Myopia Mindset. You'll be getting a bonus episode each and every month. You'll be getting extended versions of every episode, just like this one. And I got to be honest with you, I've recorded a bunch of these so far with Cary and with others, and they all have been around an hour plus. So you'll be that's like a whole other extra podcast just waiting for you if you decide to become a subscriber. And I hope you do, because for the price of basically a cup of coffee every week, that's what it would cost to become a supporter. So if you would buy me a cup of coffee to talk about myopia management, then becoming a supporter is the right path for you. Thank you so much, and let's get to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to the Myopia Mindset. This is a brand new podcast. It's been a while. I'm Matthew Herzberg, and this podcast, this brand, this whole concept is going to be devoted to giving you insights into the myopia mindset, which is a commonality that is shared, in my opinion, between successful orthokeratologists, successful ECPs who are managing myopia. And I thought, why not bring out a show that shares all of that? And I have with me Cary Herzberg, who's back. I figured Cary and I did the last time we recorded an episode. That was basically the last episode I did for the old show. So I decided to bring him back for the grand opening of the new show.
Yeah,
Cary
we're
Herzberg,
back.
welcome back to the program.
Man. Yeah, it's great to be back. You know, haven't aged a bit in 2 years. You know, still.
Yeah, for sure. Cary Herzberg, if you're not aware, is one of the all-time legends of ortho-K and myopia management, one of the pioneer doctors in our industry, responsible for the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, responsible for the International Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, along with Marino Formenti and some other key players as well. Mm-hmm. He's really been a guru for this industry. Many orthokeratologists who are out there in the trenches today cite Cary Herzberg directly as being a source of inspiration and help them, advance their careers. And so, I figured, Cary, you and I, we talk every week about myopia,
right,
and ortho-K. For the uninitiated, Cary is my father. I was the executive director of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. And our conversations didn't stop. After I left the AAOMC, he and I just kept talking about ortho-K. And I thought, why don't we just turn on the mics and keep having these conversations and share them with a larger audience? And that's what this show is going to be all about. So, Cary, are you excited to be back?
I am. I'm really excited to be back. This is like, in the blood here. This is like who we are. This is how we're wired. This is our DNA. I just wanted to briefly follow up that I am a consultant for J&J, but I won't let that interfere with our opinions today as far as what we're going to talk about, but I do disclose that. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild to, to be back with you, Matt, and be on, here again doing what we love to do, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
talking to our colleagues, it's one of my personal things is to help build this profession, help build the myopia management field, and whether you're doing ortho K or MiSight or other multifocal soft contact lenses or atropine or behavioral or whatever it is that it comes to as far as myopia management. And hopefully one of these days we'll have spectacles, by the way. That's something we'll
Yeah.
talk about down the road. But we're here. We're here for you, and it's all called myopia. No matter what you're doing, how you treat it, it's still that myopia mindset. How you look at this thing doesn't change.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up additional colleagues because in addition to Cary, I'm going to be bringing on a whole suite of other, dynamic, interesting clinicians and hopefully academics as well. I've had some conversations that kind of in the background about bringing other people on, and I want to be sharing the myopia mindset of every single one of these individuals because although you all may be practicing differently, and I personally believe every ortho K or myopia management practice is different, there are some key factors that unite all of these guys together. The men and women in this field who are making a huge difference. There are certain key factors, and sometimes, you mentioned being a consultant for J&J. Over the last 2 years, I was a clinical sales consultant with the Ability Overnight Lens with J&J, no longer with J&J at the moment. But I will say I got to see a wide range of practitioners. Through working with the AAOMC over the years, got used to working with some of the most successful orthokeratologists in the world. Like just by osmosis, I was learning so much by being in their practices, being around them at Vision by Design, having conversations with them. But what I was really lacking was just like a fundamental understanding of what brand new to ortho K and myopia management doctors were facing. I don't know what we would call the journeyman level. Like they're not beginners anymore, but they're not advanced yet. And they're still cutting their teeth and like getting it down. And over the last 2 years, I got an amazing education on what is happening on the ground level with myopia management, ortho K, and what doctors are facing and the challenges they're facing. And I noticed over the years through the AAOMC, I've been in this industry for 20 plus years now. And one consistent thing that I've noticed throughout the years is that the docs who are super successful at ortho K and myopia management have what I deem to be the myopia mindset. This idea of going like all in, this idea of like taking patient care to the next level, the idea of needing to transform their office, their practice, their staff, everything they're doing to fit a completely different practice paradigm. And I learned that growing up in Cary's practice. Cary Herzberg was the optometrist, the orthokeratologist that I worked under in his practice. His wife, my mom, was the genius level office manager that created the amazing workflow and staff connection for it all. I don't think it would have functioned without her. So I had that benefit of growing up in that practice, and that's what I can bring to that table, along with years of experience from the AAOMC. So, Cary,
Matt, that was just to chime in here. You had, you had all this insight you over the last 2 years that you didn't have before. It's invaluable. I mean, what you were exposed to, what you learned, and how to fix problems, how to see, how to make it better for the doctors. You got paid for those last 2 years, my friend. They paid you to what a perfect opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't have scripted it any better.
When they let me go, and I was telling people about it, they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." And I was like, "Why?" Like when like they let me go because they are redesigning their organization and how they want to apply their resources. And they had, reps in all of these different places, and they're creating a more efficient structure to how they want to move forward. And that didn't include me, which is totally fine because I got an amazing education by being there, learning so much.
Invaluable.
From the industry perspective is one of the things that I lacked uh, through my time with the AAOMC. I definitely got the practitioner's perspective, but I got like a different level of practitioner
Hmm.
perspective. You know what I mean? So it's like I absolutely valued my time there. Super thankful. I thank them for the opportunity. And it definitely put me in this mode where I'm like, you know what? I want to get back to the podcast. You know, I want to
Right.
create something of my own. I want to create something that is motivational. Like there's a lot of doom and gloom around, you know, becoming an orthokeratologist or a myopia management doctor. There's a lot of misunderstandings. I feel like a lot of ECPs out there kind of need that weekly, you know, shot in the arm, the motivational, you know, component, in addition to learning a lot and getting perspective, you know. And so that's what I want to share with this show. I wanted our first episode back, Cary, to be about the new era of myopia management, which is kind of the last thing you and I talked about on the mics, because 2 years ago, I was still with the AOMC. You had just signed on as a consultant with Johnson and Johnson.
Hmm.
Cooper Vision had made a big play into the space already. Things were
Right.
changing. Several interesting things were happening in the industry. And you and I were looking at, we're like, wow, we are in a brand new era. Like you and I, when we started and then built the AOMC, you know, we viewed the era that you and I are in now, that we're all in now, as a dream come true. You know, to have
We
major
did. Yeah.
industry involved in this space.
Right.
We both said this is like a dream come true. We never thought this would happen. It's incredible. Everything's about to change. So I kind of wanted to check in with you 2 years
Yeah.
later.
Exactly. What
And like,
happened, actually?
yeah, it's kind of like what happened, you know,
Not
like,
quite according to how we thought things were going to work out.
yeah.
So,
So are we still in the new era? You know,
oh
like
my
where
God.
are we at
Well,
now?
yeah, we're kind of like transitioning, I think, into something, but I'm not sure what that is at this point. I mean, the whole field is changing,
Mm-hmm.
including Ortho K. And I think it's this transition period. And, uh, the companies are using the same terminology and talking about the transition period. So I guess we should adopt that because everybody's transitioning at this point. What we're going to have out of this, obviously, I'm a very positive person. I look at the glass always as it being at least half full. So I look at as being this is a land of opportunity, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
myopia management is a field of opportunity for us. You're going to have to work at it to get there. That
Mm-hmm.
hasn't changed. Unfortunately, at this point, the education that the public needs hasn't happened yet. So I was looking at a survey the other day that said the doctors still, most people don't know that the parents don't know really about that much about myopia yet. And so I think, our work is cut out for us, because obviously each of us in our practices, that's what we should be doing. At least we'll talk about it, as far as
Yeah.
education, education, education. It's a good news, bad news thing. The good news is the fact there's not as many people doing it. If you're a doctor doing this, there's not as many people doing this as we thought there would be at this point, which means more opportunity for you. The other part of that, the bad news part, is it's a lot harder than I think a lot of people anticipated, as far as
Okay.
getting this launched.
Harder
A lot
how?
more. Well, you've got to, you made a swivel into myopia. In the years past, myopia has been thought of as being, the cash cow of optometry. It's a
Mm-hmm.
refractive condition, and that's why your patients will come through to see you before they're 40 years of age, is because they're getting more and more myopic. You don't see that many hyperopes for different reasons. So myopia is a cash cow. And so, you're moving from a standpoint of just, whatever it is that you're making contacts or glasses for a patient like that. Um, and then you're moving into the point where you're now talking about myopia as a disease process. And that's a big, big deal. I don't think we as doctors are there yet. I don't think we've really, some of us are,
Mm.
but not enough. And so I think that once you reach the critical mass, enough doctors that are get on board of this process, and I think you're going to see bigger changes happening more quickly. What needs to happen along with this is industry. I mean, they've got to participate here. I talk to the people I consult with, and I talk about getting involved in the schools and educating the young doctors as they're coming out into, what this opportunity means, what myopia is all about. And the other thing, the other part of this thing, the other support thing that has to come out of this is that we need a classification of myopia as a disease process. It can't be just a refractive condition. We need to be able to just type this out. We're filing for these things and say that this is a disease process as well. So until we can really do that on more of an official basis, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I would characterize it as, all of the same problems are still here. And, the more optimistic version, I think, will fall to you. I do consider myself to be a very positive person as well. But this relationship would be very boring if you and I agreed on everything. And I have a little bit more of a negative view on the state of the industry and the future of the industry. Now, is it doom and gloom? No, it is not. Can we do better? And can there be more? There definitely can. When you and I last talked about this topic 2 years ago, I had stars in my eyes about, oh, everything is changing now. And it still can. It's just that what I didn't realize back then is that just because you have major players who come into this situation, just because the dynamic changes, just because more docs start envisioning a myopia management practice, doesn't mean that the existing problems are going to go away. They're just not going to be instantly solved overnight. And full disclosure, I don't have any knowledge of how things work at J&J. I was simply a clinical sales consultant. My job was visiting practices and selling ability overnight, and then working with those practices on all of the key factors that one would deem necessary to work with an Ortho-K product, right? I wasn't privy to any extra knowledge. I have I don't claim to know anything behind the scenes. But before that, when we last talked, the way I looked at it is like, well, with these major companies involved, they will just make these problems disappear. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because of their sheer involvement level. And to be honest, I think a lot of people had that opinion of the situation. And I think the more realistic approach is that these are big enough obstacles that we all deal with. Like, how much a parent understands, what is the public perception. We're going to get into that in a later episode about what is the public perception of Ortho-K myopia management, the myopia epidemic. What does the school system look like? What is the state of the industry? Like these problems almost become bigger as major industry starts to get involved. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, and also there's another issue coming up here too, that most of the, Ortho-K is the granddaddy. Okay, Ortho-K is the original myopia management tool.
Yeah.
And so we went through a series of times where we got promises and people said they're going to do this for that and got constantly disappointed. So we didn't see that. I think the younger colleagues now, maybe not get into Ortho-K as much, maybe more multifocal soft contact lenses or atropine or whatever. They're not used to that. They haven't seen what we've seen, the track record here of industry taking 1 or 2 steps forward and then a step or 2 back again. But that's, for us, that's been the track record here with Ortho-K. And, the thing is, it's not changing with myopia. That's the thing. It's, we used to say, well, okay, the reason why Ortho-K is difficult is because doctors don't, the uptake isn't as good as it should be. They're not doing it as much. And we're going to talk about that today, about some of the pretty cool stuff that's out there that's will increase their, ability to do this and make it a lot simpler for them. But that was the excuse back then, was doctors are not taking it up. So you can't expect that you are going to see the kinds of revenues that these companies need to put into the industry. And plus, back then, the industry was mom and pop organizations. They were not the big J&Js or Cooper Visions. So they didn't look at the whole field that same way. They had their own infrastructure they needed support, and they didn't really look towards the academy or other things as far as putting money into that. We tried. We really tried to get them to make, to do that. They just couldn't see it. Very nearsighted, actually, industry-wise. But so we went through that, but it turns out now here's myopia. It's the same thing again. I mean, it's the uptake again. And it's not Ortho-K. What's your excuse this time? Well, it's Is it a failure in our educational system? Is these doctors not prepared enough to do this? Do they not have the tools? Do they not have the perspective? You know what I'm saying? You're going to start looking for those things, and we'll certainly talk about a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's not any easier today talking about myopia when it certainly should be easier than it was when we were talking about ortho-K back then. Because I can give you verse and kind of, show you examples of why it was so difficult to get this moving, and it makes sense. Today we don't have those same issues, and yet it's not moving. So it's very slow uptake again, and we're just not there. So here we go again. When will we see things changes? I'm again a very optimistic person. I think that if you have to have a big enough consensus to make things change, but I'm also realistic enough to understand that maybe myopia is going to remain a specialty rather than being everybody's going to be doing it. Not that doctors won't, they will, but we'll talk again about your frequency in practice, how many times you're going to treat a patient for myopia management versus other things. And so, to become a specialist means that you really have to, this has to be your primary focus. And I think that's really the place it needs to be. And I'm not sure how many doctors are going to really take up that model. There's just too much noise out there, too many different things that they're doing right now, and too many distractions. So they don't see the profit. They see a lot of education. They don't see the profit on the other end to reward them, especially in this vision care plan field we're dealing with now with the low reimbursements. They definitely don't see that. That's a tough, we see this stuff now. I'm not sure industry really gets that full point, but I think they're getting there. So I think once we approach that, then the question is, well, how do you respond to that? Where do you go forward with that? Do you change hopefully get your education up to par where you can turn doctors out so they don't get intimidated when they get out there. They already are on point.
Right.
So, that's kind of where I see this at the moment.
My perspective, and this is based on 20 years of experience of being in this industry, from all points and times. And again, not privy to any extra knowledge about what's happening in CooperVision or Johnson & Johnson. But what I will say is I have a different opinion. I don't think all optometrists should be doing myopia management. I look at and I was very vocal about this 2 years ago when I was with the AOMC. You can go back and check on the episodes of The Corrected View. I'm back then I was like, I'm starting to think that, like you called it the 20/80 rule. I think you coined that term. I'm a firm believer that that's actually the case, and I love all treatments that help the patient. I love MiSight, Ortho-K. I love all of it. The spectacles, when, whatever it is that's treating the patient, I'm a huge fan of it. Let's address the problem. Right. But what I will say is that there's a lot of optometrists out there who have no interest in actually doing myopia management, but they do have an interest in offering myopia management. And I think that Ortho-K, unless another technology comes along, Ortho-K is going to continue its legacy as the grandparent of myopia management. Like it is going to be the stable, iconic feature of myopia management. As you have so many doctors who begin to take on something like MiSight, and again, love MiSight. It's treating and helping the patient. Please use it, right? But you're going to have a lot of practices that are like, well, I'm doing myopia management. I offer MiSight or Ability One Day when that comes out in the United States. And then there's going to be the higher level of myopia management practitioner who does Ortho-K, because that's how you're going to have to set yourself above the rest. And that group, in my opinion, is very small, So I don't think that there is like a massive amount of orthokeratologists at the very least out there. I think it's more akin to the 20/80 rule that 20% are going to be doing the 80% of the cases. Right. That's what I think the future is. And I'm agreeing with past you that said that's where your investment should be in this industry. If from Cary Herzberg's own perspective, right? That's what I think the landscape is moving forward. There is so many roadblocks in that you have to overcome to do myopia management, to do ortho K specifically, I'm going to do an episode that's, I'm going to call it, let me talk you out of doing myopia management, because I don't think there's a problem. I don't think everybody should be doing it, and that's kind of what the myopia mindset is all about. Like there's a reason why some doctors are succeeding at this, but a lot are not,
Yeah, and there's a lot of different reasons why that's happening too. There's a plethora of different reasons why it's happening. It's but as we're getting back to the myopia mindset, yeah, that success will happen because you do treat it as a specialty. What do you have to do with a specialty? It's you're going to treat glaucoma or dry eye, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You got to learn all you can about that. You're going to go, and that's going to be an area that you spend a lot of time focusing on. And then in your practice, you're probably not going to be doing as much as some other things. You probably, you may not do VT, may not do other kinds of specialties. But that's how it's supposed to be, because we try to be this master of everything, and we can become the master of none, right? So I've been a big proponent that in optometry, we need to think about specialization really strongly, not just in myopia management, but across the board. I think we ought to be able to call ourselves specialists, advertise that fact, and have our associations, push that. And I'm not talking about the board certification stuff that happened a couple of years ago. I'm talking about actually doing it like ophthalmology does it, where you do residencies and other things where you really actually learn. The specialists, the top people teach you how to do that, and then you can actually qualify yourself as saying, "This is what I do." So you can take, maybe take 6 to 12 months out of your life to do this with. It's serious stuff. But in the end, you're practicing somewhere that this is what you want to do. Also, the other thing that happens is that what I find very frequently in practices is that a practice is most everybody takes vision care plans. We actually dropped those years and years ago because I did specialize, and I refused to take less than I was worth.
Right.
And I was able to do that because I specialized. So that's a thing that we want to teach, our young colleagues who are interested. But, the mindset of in a vision care plan is you have to see a lot of patients in a day and not spend a lot of time with them, because you don't get a compensate. They compensate like 1/3 your normal fees or something. So you got to see 3 patients to make the regular fee. I used to joke is that you can do 25 exams and glasses and whatever you want. I'll take 2 ortho K, the equivalency. So I'll do the 2 ortho K, spend my time doing that. You can do the 25 and knock yourself out.
Right.
Usually what happens with that is it's burnout. It's Burnoutville, because you can't, you're just, again, you're doing this like a mill. You're turning these things out, and then in the end, that's not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. So what the doctors need to do is to manage, if they want to be myopia specialists, myopia management specialists, they need to do the education. They need to take the time with each patient. They're all talking preventive care. It boils down to and we'll talk about my background. We'll talk about that. But they won't pay you more for preventive care. Well, preventive care by definition means you're going to sit down and talk about the patient. You spend extra time, and yet you're not getting compensated for that. Where does any of this make sense? It just doesn't.
Yeah, that is one thing I have noticed in the last 20 years of being in this industry, is that a lot of, if not most, optometrists, especially when it comes to myopia management, are extremely gun shy about collecting the appropriate amount of fees to, because the way I put it is like, you shouldn't just charge appropriately, you should profit from what you're doing. And if you go back into the history of optometrists, I've heard like optometry as a profession started in the jewelry stores, or at least like that there was a component of that. Like,
back in the early 1900s.
We come from a multi-generational family of optometrists. Wasn't like great grandfather like practicing, and it's like, I don't know if that's
Marcus.
like some sort of weird curse that we've inherited in the modern era, but like, and we don't want to be like some sort of like sleazy salesperson, but
it's like, it's because, it's like the Hertz and Avis thing, like it's not an MD, it's an OD. So there's always been like the second class citizenship in our minds only, which shouldn't be there, because being an OD is really special. I can do many things ophthalmology doesn't do, and it doesn't know how to do it. And I'm perfectly willing to live within their space and let them do what they do well. So, that it's this but there's this mentality, it's not an MD, and patients will say, well, you're not a real doctor, that kind of thing,
Sure.
So that's some of that, and yes, it is. So we have a problem. I don't have a problem myself, but I mean, our profession has a problem charging fees for services, and we find our own ways to get around charging the patient fees, the proper fees, because we're afraid of rejection, or we're afraid that they're not going to think worthy of us, or whatever it is, how much, that we're not worth what we're telling them. But that in the end, it's a sales job in the end, because we have to begin and do this sales job to begin with, as far as an eye care professional. And again, we're going to devote a whole episodes to just how
we're going to devote episodes to this topic for sure. All right, that's it for this regular version of the Myopia Mindset podcast. Supporters get an extended full discussion about all of the topics and more that Cary and I discussed. And if that seems appealing to you, I would highly recommend becoming a supporter at myopiamindset.com. I know you're interested. You've made it this far in the podcast. You get a bonus episode each and every month. Our bonus episode for this month was about vision by design and why it is so critically important to the success of our industry. We talked about it for almost 2 hours. I think 6 minutes short of 2 hours. We talked about the history of it, like why it's valuable, where it's come from, and where it's going, because Cary and I were there from the very beginning. And I want you to know that the Myopia Mindset is very special to me. This is my main gig. It's my mission. It's what I'm passionate about. My goal with this podcast is to provide inspiration, education, motivation to get you fired up every episode about doing better in myopia management, becoming more successful, getting engaged in these topics, hearing from people who have been successful in this space. And if you believe in what I'm doing and you're interested in more, consider supporting us. Myopiamindset.com is where you do that. You click on the subscriber button. We got a Substack, and it's basically just the price of a cup of coffee each week. So if you enjoyed what you heard or saw thus far, and if Cary and I were in the car with you, or washing dishes with you, or walking the dog with you, and we were like, hey, would you buy us a cup of coffee just to continue the conversation? And you would, then please consider becoming a subscriber. Support the Myopia Mindset podcast. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next one.